Thank you. Well, let me thank Reverend Sharpton and Reverend Richardson and all of you for allowing me to be with you to share some ideas. And let me begin by thanking all of you for doing what too few Americans, in fact, are doing. You're not just sitting back, complaining, or worrying, or moaning and groaning. You're standing up and you're fighting back, and that's what we need in this country. I have a history of being blunt, so let's be blunt today. What blunt is being about is telling the truth in politics at a time when not a lot of truth is being told. So here are some of the truths that we need to be talking about. Number one, in this room, throughout this country, men and women have put their lives on the line to defend American democracy. Here is the truth. In many ways, the foundations of American democracy today are being undermined by disastrous campaign finance laws, Citizens United Supreme Court decision, and by voter suppression among Republican governors all over this country. So let us be clear. Truth number one is democracy means one person, one vote. You want to vote for me? Love to have it. You want to vote against me? That's called democracy. Billionaires who represent the wealthy and the powerful should not be about buying elections. That's why we're going to overturn Citizens United. When billionaires buy elections, that's called oligarchy, not democracy. Number two, and I know the National Action Network has been fighting this tooth and nail, and that is we have a level of Republican voter suppression that is absolutely outrageous. You would have thought that after all we have gone through as a country to make sure that people have the right to vote, regardless of the color of their skin, that these Republican governors would show some mercy and not try to bring us back to Jim Crow days. The idea that they are passing laws restricting the right to vote, making it harder for people to vote, poor people, old people, people of color, that is moving in exactly the wrong way. Now, I see my old friend Reverend Jackson here. He has an idea. Others have a different idea. But what we all agree on is at the end of the day, in America, if you are 18 years of age and you're an American citizen, you have the right to vote. Maybe we do it through a constitutional amendment. Maybe we do it in another way. But I'm tired of people figuring out ways to shrink the voter turnout. We've got to expand the voter turnout. Number two, I am embarrassed to have to admit this, but I am old enough to have been at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. I was there with Dr. King. Dates me, but I was there. But I want everybody to remember what I know you all know. The name of that march, it's not just the March on Washington, it was the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, all right, Reverend Sharpton?
I wasn't there, but you asked.
He's a kid. He's a good kid. He's growing. He's learning. Jobs and freedom. And what Dr. King understood is, of course, you have to destroy segregation. Of course, you have to open up opportunity for all people. But then he said, what does it matter if you desegregate a lunch counter, but you don't have the money to buy the damn hamburger? And this is what he said back in the 1960s. And it's sad to remember how much distance we still have to go. This is Dr. King. He said, the other America, he talked about two America, he says the other America was plagued by, quote, inadequate, substandard, and often dilapidated housing conditions. Well, guess what? I was in Baltimore, Maryland, a few months ago in a community where so many of the homes were boarded up. I've been in communities all over this country where gentrification is destroying neighborhoods. I have been in communities where people are paying 50, 60% of their limited incomes in housing. We have all been in communities where too many people are sleeping out on the street. Dr. King talks about substandard, inferior, quality-less schools. We all know what's going on in inner-city education all over this country. Go to Detroit, Michigan. Their schools are literally crumbling. People here from Detroit, am I right? But it's not just Detroit. Schools are dropout factories, and kids are going nowhere in a hurry. And then he talks about people having to choose between unemployment and low-wage jobs that don't even pay enough to put food on the table. Dr. King recognized, quote, it is criminal to have people working on a full-time basis and a full-time job getting part-time income, end of quote. Well, that was the 1960s. Sad to say, it is still true today in many respects. Is that correct? All right, so what are we going to do about it? And then the third part, you got a corrupt campaign finance system, we have a rigged economy, and we got a broken criminal justice system. All right, the rigged economy. Right now, you got millions of people trying to make it on $9 or $10 an hour. You can't make it on $9 or $10 an hour. Not if you're black, not if you're Latino, not if you're white, not if you're anybody. All right? Just doesn't add up. The arithmetic doesn't add up. Now, in the very beginning of this campaign, wasn't so popular then, a little bit more popular now, I said, when people work 40 hours a week, they should not be living in poverty. We're going to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Not everybody agreed with me. My opponent did not think that was right, still doesn't. But I think it is right. We're going to have pay equity for women so that nationally women don't make 79 cents on the dollar, and minority women, that gap is a lot wider. We're going to have a trade policy which doesn't allow corporations to shut down in America, move to China and other low-wage countries, throw millions of American workers out on the street. We're going to demand the corporate America reinvest in this country. You know, I didn't know this. I didn't know this until a few months ago. Some of you know that in the 1960s, cities like Detroit, Michigan, and Flint, Michigan were some of the wealthiest cities in America. Did you all know that? I didn't know that. What happened is the automobile industry shut down, and a lot of those plants moved abroad. We have got to rebuild manufacturing in America, create decent-paying jobs here, and I intend to do that by changing our trade policies. I was in Flint, Michigan a couple of months ago, and my friends, what I saw there was literally almost unspeakable and hard to describe. I was supposed to give a speech after I talked to some citizens of Flint, talked to some parents who had witnessed the impact of the poisoning of their children. It was very hard for me to give that speech. to believe that in the year 2016, parents were watching the cognitive ability of their children decline. Kids who had been bright, gregarious kids, good students, were now in special education because of what lead in the water had done to those children. This is America 2016. We should not be poisoning our children. But it is not just Flint, Michigan. It is inner cities all over this country. So I've got a simple question. How does it happen we have trillions of dollars available to spend on a war in Iraq we never should have gotten into? But then we're told we don't have the funds available to rebuild inner cities in America. I disagree. There is no reason why youth unemployment in this country is at a disgracefully high level. Now, I got a lot of problems with media because very often in campaigns, media are interested in political gossip, but not the reality of American political life. All right. Want to know how much money you raised, how you doing in the polls? That's fine, that's okay. But it is more important to know what's happening to the people of America. And I'll tell you what's happening to the young people of America. I had some economists do a study for me a number of months ago. This is what they found. For kids 17 through 20 who were high school graduates, not dropouts. Kids were white, real unemployment, 33%. Latino, 36%. African American kids, 51%. This is a national outrage. Anyone here think that those outrageously jailed in any other country would be sorely mistaken. So here is a not so radical idea. We are going to invest in education and jobs for our kids, not jails and incarceration. Costs less money to send kids to college than it is to lock them up. I'd rather send them to college. Now, when we talk about a broken criminal justice, let's get to it. Let's talk about what we're talking about. First of all, our job is to make sure kids do not end up in jail, and that means education and jobs. That's what it means. We could do it. Second of all, it means taking a very hard look at local police departments all over this country. Now, the truth is, as you all know, local police departments are run by local municipalities. But federal government can play a major role in a number of areas. Federal government has the carrot, the reward, it has the stick, the punishment. Lack of financial support. What do we need? Number one, all of us in this room, we are tired, more than tired, of seeing the videos of Sandra Bland and Eric Garner and all the rest who are unarmed, and Michael Brown, you name it, a long list, a list too long, who are killed by police officers when they're unarmed. All right? We're tired of seeing that. And what that means is that, like any other public official, a police officer must be held accountable if they break the law. Now, I've worked with police departments all over my state of Vermont, all over this country. Most police officers are honest and hardworking. But if a police officer breaks the law, that officer must be held accountable. Number two, what we have got to do is to demilitarize local police departments. Police departments should not look like occupying armies. This is not Iraq. We're not invading a community. Number three, it is not too much to ask that local police departments reflect the diversity of the communities they serve. Number 4, I am very proud to be the first candidate in this campaign, and I've introduced legislation to do this, to say that corporations should not be running and owning prisons and detention centers. Corporations should not be making more money when we send more people to jail. We got to figure out how we keep people out of jail, not send more people to jail. Number 5, what we have to do is train police departments all over this country to understand that lethal force, killing people, is the last response, not the first response. 6, not everybody here will agree with me, but this is what I think. I think we've got to rethink the so-called war on drugs. What does that mean? It means that over the last 30 years, millions of Americans have received police records because of possession of marijuana. This becomes a racial issue because it just turns out that according to studies, blacks and whites do marijuana at about equal rates. Blacks are 4 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana than whites. All right? Many, many lives have been destroyed. You're a kid. You're 19 years of age. You're arrested, marijuana. You go out, you try to get a job. Well, young man, have you ever had a police record? Well, yes, sir, I have. Arrested. Oh, well, thank you. There's somebody else waiting for that job. Kids can't get jobs. The kids don't get income. Bad things happen. Right now, marijuana is listed Schedule 1 drug under the Federal Controlled Substance Act. I will take marijuana out of that Federal Controlled Substance Act. Furthermore, when we talk about drugs, everybody here knows that in this country today we have a serious epidemic, heroin and opiates. We need to understand that to effectively treat substance abuse and addiction, you know what? We got to understand these are health issues, not criminal issues. That means we got to revolutionize mental health treatment in America. That means we make mental health treatment available to people when they need it, not 6 months from now. All right, when we talk about the economy, Reverend Sharpton was right. When we're talking about economic problems, they exist all over, but disproportionately in the African American community and the Latino community. Real unemployment is not 5%. It's double that when you include people giving up looking for work, people working part-time. And the African American community is a lot higher than that. Bottom line is, let me be the first to tell you, we need a massive federal jobs program to put our people back to work. Well, how are we going to do that? What's the best way to do that? The best way to do that is to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. All right, what that means is we end the Flint, Michigan-style water system. We rebuild water systems, wastewater plants, roads, bridges, schools, affordable housing, levees and dams and airports and rail and mass transit in New York, Philadelphia, and elsewhere. And when you rebuild your infrastructure, you make America stronger, safer. You create, with $1 trillion investment, 13 million decent-paying jobs. Think about what that does to America's economy and the needs of poor people. When we talk about the needs of our people, let us be very clear. Today, the world is different than it was 50 years ago. 50 years ago, somebody has a high school degree. You know what? You go out and get a pretty good job, right? Get a job in a factory, got a union behind you, you're doing okay. Today, in many ways, a college degree is the equivalent of what a high school degree was 50 years ago. So what all of that means is not only do we have to rebuild our public school system, not only do we have to make sure that we have the great young people going into education, going into childcare, but we also have to understand that in the year 2016, public education cannot just mean first grade through 12th grade. We need to make public colleges and universities tuition-free. Now, you know why that's important? That's important not just because it saves young people who may not have much money a lot of money and they don't come out of school in debt. This is what it else does. I grew up in a family, never had a lot of money. My parents never went to college. I want every child in America. I want kids in the 4th grade here in New York City to understand that even if their parents never went to college, even if their family has no money, if those kids study hard, take school seriously, regardless of the income of those kids, they will be able to get a college education. That's revolutionary. While we are on economic issues, let me say something to you that I have been criticized for saying, so I'll say it again, because I don't want any ambiguity here. Let's be straightforward about it. I happen to believe that health care is a right of all people. I happen to believe that there is something very wrong when the United States, our great nation, the wealthiest nation in the history of the world, is the only major country that doesn't guarantee health care to all people. Does that sound right? I don't think so. I work with President Obama, and I'm proud of the success we had in passing the Affordable Care Act. It's a big step forward. We did away with this obscenity called pre-existing conditions. We added 17 million more Americans to the ranks of the insured, and we did away with discrimination against women in many respects. But here's where we are today, despite the ACA. 29 million Americans, no health insurance. Many of you have health insurance, but you are underinsured with large deductibles and copayments. Is that right? All right. And then every person in this room and in America is getting ripped off by the greed of the drug companies who are charging us the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. That is why I believe we've got to do what every other country on earth does and pass a Medicare for all single-payer system. Here is what this campaign is about and the decision that the people of New York are going to have to make on Tuesday. If you believe that given the crises we face as a nation, a declining middle class, 47 million people living in poverty, a broken criminal justice system, a campaign finance system that is corrupt, climate change which is threatening not only our country but the whole world, millions of kids leaving school deeply in debt, a dysfunctional child care system, public education which is not doing what it should be doing. If you believe that those issues can be addressed by establishment politics and establishment economics, you've got a very good candidate to vote for, but it's not Bernie Sanders. That's the truth. If you think, and I don't mean to be disrespectful here, that you can run for office, have a super PAC, and raise tens of millions of dollars from wealthy special interests, and then go out and take on the big money interests and protect working family, well, if you think that, you got a very good candidate out there, but it is not Bernie Sanders. But if you believe that now is the time for real change, if you believe that now is the time that millions of people, black and white and Latino and Asian American and Native American, that our people come together, that we tell the Donald Trumps of the world, sorry, you're not going to divide us up. We're coming together. And if you want a candidate who has stood up to every special interest throughout his political career, back in 1988, I was the mayor of the largest city in the state of Vermont, an almost all-white state then. I supported Jesse Jackson running for president. That wasn't a popular thing to do. I had to take on the whole Democratic establishment in the state of Vermont. I stood up. I'll never forget this, in a meeting in Burlington, Vermont. People turned their backs on me. That's how much they disliked what I was doing. All right? Jesse Jackson, Jesse, you win the state of Vermont? He won the state of Vermont. Wasn't a popular thing to do. Welfare rights bill. What was that, 96? Yeah. Oh, that was an easy bill to be for because it scapegoated the poorest people in America. All of the welfare recipients, all the welfare queens, remember that? Very easy bill to vote for. I didn't vote for that. I voted against that bill, spoke out against that bill. So what this campaign is about is whether we go with the status quo. And by the way, I've known Hillary Clinton for 25 years, and I mean this very seriously. You all know that. She's an extremely intelligent woman with a wonderful resume, a whole lot of experience. I've known her, and we've been friends for 25 years. You know, in a campaign, things get heated up. But I have a lot of respect for her. But that is what this campaign is about. It is whether we bring people together to tell the people on top that they cannot have it all, that we're not going to live in a nation where the top 1/10 of 1% now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. I don't think that's what America should be about. Not a nation where 58% of all new income goes to the top 1%. That's not what America's supposed to be about. So here's where it is. You elect me president, you're going to have a president who is prepared to take on the billionaire class, not take their money. So that is what this campaign is about now. As some of you may know, we have won 8 out of the 9 last caucuses and primaries. We started this campaign 60 points behind Hillary Clinton in the national polls. Last couple of polls over the last few weeks had us ahead in several polls. We are beating Donald Trump by 20 points in national polls. And I believe, along with many other people, that if you want to beat Donald Trump, you're looking at the strongest Democratic candidate to do that. For those of you in New York, I need your help on Tuesday. Let us have this great state join so many others and say we are going to go forward with a political revolution. We're going to have a government representing all of us, not just the 1%. Thank you very much.
Well, they quickly cut out of that and quickly went straight to the White House. Maybe they just want to show you the house that Bernie Sanders wants to live in come January. Speaking of the National Action Network, yesterday Hillary Clinton also spoke at this event. Let's hear what Hillary had to say.
Came and spoke at this same hotel to National Action Network's convention. Since being president, the president spoke here twice. So when you hear the media tomorrow say, why did Secretary Clinton come to NAN, it's because they've been doing that for over a decade. Last year, Dr. Ben Carson spoke at NAN as a Republican candidate. Senator Sanders spoke last year. He will speak tomorrow. We also have had Newt Gingrich here. And if you get the Silver Anniversary book, the one that cut the ribbon to the National Action Network convention in 2002, I put the picture in the book, was a real estate developer named Donald Trump. So when he questions Mrs. Clinton being here, show him the photo. Go to the tape. Mrs. Clinton and I have known each other over 20 years. When we've disagreed, and I've disagreed on the crime bill and other things, we've always discussed it. When we've agreed, she has not been shamed, bashful, or in any way stepping back, on coming out very vocally, as she did when Amadou Diallo was killed by police, and she took a public stand about policing. The mother of Amadou Diallo is with us this morning. The widow of Eric Garner is with us this morning. The mother of Eric Garner is with us this morning. Stand up, my daughter's here. Michael Brown's mother's here from Ferguson, Missouri. The mother of Sean Bell and the father of Sean Bell. The mother of Ramali Graham is with us. And my sister, who has worked shoulder to shoulder with us, and all of them were doing a panel as soon as the speech is over. My sister from Florida, Sabrina Fulton, the mother of Trayvon Martin, is with us. I hope I got everybody, because they will beat me up. One thing this organization does, we do not get involved in cases unless we're asked by the family. All the families will tell you that. And we don't leave when the cameras leave. We stay there, we'll be there to the end. And no matter what happens, whatever settlement get, we don't ask, receive, get, or even ask for reimbursement. Whatever we do with families, we do for justice only. I want that clear. Senator Clinton, then Senator, spoke up on Amadou Diallo. When we had a protest in Vieques, Puerto Rico, around Navy bombing, and we were engaged in civil disobedience, Robert Kennedy Jr., who will be here tomorrow night, and others. And I was given 90 days in jail with 3 others. They put us in jail in San Juan. Senator Clinton negotiated to say at least they can do their time in the States, and had us brought to the federal jail here in Brooklyn. I remember the 3rd night that we were there. She came to visit us in jail, and they were outraged. A sitting senator would go to a federal jail to visit inmates. She said to us, what is it that I can communicate as she was leaving? What is it that you want? Is there anything I can do? And I remember one said, well, we'd like to get something to eat. The other said, I would like to get a phone call to my family. The other said, if you can arrange it, I'd like to get a Bible. She said, Reverend Al, what do you want? I said, the key. She didn't get me the key, but she did bring me back to New York. So we have known each other through the years. I've not made an endorsement in this race, but I want to be very clear that the issues need to be dealt with in a substantive way. This must not be a soundbite, low content, no serious debate. Black America must be taken seriously. We must be talked to in a substantive manner, and we must be dealt with more than slogans and things that cannot be explained on how we're going to achieve. We must be taken seriously, because no one can win unless we vote seriously in November. So it is my honor to bring the former senator of the state of New York, former Secretary of State, who has been here before under several capacities, the Honorable Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Thank you. Thank you. I thought you also asked for some fried chicken. If I remember that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I am delighted to be back here, and I want to send greetings to everyone, particularly to Reverend Sharpton and to the board, to Reverend Richardson and all of those who work with him, to Melanie Campbell, to my longtime friend Hazel Dukes, and to all who are gathered here today. It is wonderful to be back at the National Action Network for the 25th anniversary of your work on the front lines of our nation's continuing struggle for civil rights. You stand up and always have against gun violence, advocate for criminal justice reform, help young people find jobs, hold corporations accountable, and in a million ways lift up voices that too often go unheard. So for me, it's great being back in New York and wonderful being here. And I appreciate Reverend Sharpton introducing the mothers and other loved ones of those whom we have lost. People who are joined in a club of grief that none of us ever want to be members of. And I am grateful for their witness and their extraordinary commitment to criminal justice reform, to common sense gun reforms, and so much else. You know, on Monday, at a celebration of Jackie Robinson, who played his first game for the Brooklyn Dodgers 69 years ago this week, Reverend Sharpton said America was never the same. Well, I think it's fair to say that holds true for the National Action Network as well. And I want you to imagine what Jackie Robinson would say if he could see us now. The decades since he put down his glove have brought remarkable progress. The rise of the black middle class, the tremendous leadership of African Americans in all walks of life, from business and law to government, science, the arts, all the professions, and of course, Barack and Michelle Obama in the White House. But as you know so well, the last few years also have laid bare deep fault lines in America. They've revealed how frayed our bonds of trust and respect have become. Despite our best efforts and our highest hopes, America's long struggle with racism is far from finished. And we are seeing that in this election. When the front runner for the Republican nomination was asked in a national television interview to disavow David Duke and other white supremacists supporting his campaign, he played coy. This is the same Donald Trump who led the insidious birther movement to delegitimize President Obama. He has called Mexican immigrants rapists and murderers. He wants to ban all Muslims from entering the United States, and the list goes on. And not to be outdone by his primary rival, Ted Cruz would treat Muslim Americans like criminals and religiously profile their neighborhoods. So ugly currents that lurked just below the surface of our politics have burst into the open. And everyone sees this bigotry for what it is. Therefore, it is up to all of us to repudiate it. Here in New York, we don't all look the same, sound the same, or worship the same. But we have learned over the years that America's problems won't be solved by building walls and dividing our country between us and them. We know our diversity is a strength, not a weakness. And New York represents the best of American values, despite what some on the other side have said, and that we have to constantly challenge ourselves to stand up and face all that we still have to overcome. Now, of course, the problem goes far deeper than Donald Trump or Ted Cruz. More than a half a century after Rosa Parks sat and Dr. King marched and John Lewis bled, race still plays a significant role in determining who gets ahead in America and who gets left behind. There's something wrong, my friends, when the median wealth for black families is a tiny fraction of the median wealth for white families, when African Americans are still more likely to be denied a mortgage. Something's wrong when black kids get arrested for petty crimes, but white kids who do the same things don't. Something's wrong when gun violence is by far the leading cause of death for young black men, outstripping the next 9 causes of death combined. Something's wrong when so many black parents are burying their children. Imagine if a white baby in parts of our country was twice as likely to die before her first birthday than a black baby. Imagine the outcry and the resources that would flood in to save those babies. These are not only problems of economic inequality, they are also problems of racial inequality. And it is time we face up to the reality of systemic racism in all of its forms. And once we do, we are called to come together to break down all the barriers that still hold African Americans back from fully participating in our economy and our society, and together to build ladders of opportunity and empowerment in their place. As I have said many times, white Americans need to do a much better job of listening when African Americans talk about the seen and unseen barriers you face every day. We need to recognize our privilege and practice humility, rather than assume our experiences are everyone else's experiences. We need to try, as best we can, to walk in your shoes, to imagine what it would be like to sit down our son or daughter and have the talk. Or if people followed us around stores or locked their car doors when we walked past. This is a discipline that I have recognized and tried to practice in my own life ever since my Methodist youth minister took our Methodist Youth Fellowship group from our nearly all-white suburb to worship with black and Latino children in Chicago and to hear Dr. King speak. And then in my first semester at law school, I met a woman named Marian Wright Edelman. Marian was actually here with me the last time I spoke at the National Action Network in 2007. Many of you know her story. She was the first black woman admitted to the Mississippi Bar, a lawyer for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund in Jackson. a friend of Dr. King's and Robert Kennedy's before they were assassinated. Altogether, a remarkable leader. Until I met Marion, I wasn't clear how to channel my faith and commitment to social justice to make both a living and a difference in the world. I went to work for her at the Children's Defense Fund. She sent me to her home state of South Carolina to investigate the problem of black teenagers being incarcerated in adult jails. And when I look back at everything else I've done, whether it was going undercover in Alabama as a young woman to help expose segregated academies and strip them of their tax exemptions, or running the legal clinic at the University of Arkansas to represent prison inmates and poor families, it was all part of the same mission: to fight injustice and even the odds for those who have the odds stacked against them in life and in our society. That was true when, as First Lady, I worked with both Republicans and Democrats in Congress to create the Children's Health Insurance Program that covers 8 million children. It was true when, as the senator from New York, I worked with parents and doctors and community leaders to take on the epidemic of children's asthma in Harlem and the Bronx. It was true when I worked with the organization 100 Black Men to create the Eagle Academy, a public school here in New York City whose mission is serving young Black and Latino men. Or when I joined partners in New York, the congressional delegation like Charlie Rangel and Greg Meeks, to bring jobs and investment to underserved neighborhoods, and worked with leaders, including my great friend, the late Stephanie Tubbs Jones, to protect voting rights. It was true when I went to David Dinkins' annual conference last April at Columbia University and gave the first policy speech of my presidential campaign about reforming our criminal justice system and ending the era of mass incarceration. So what I have tried to do, what I intend to keep doing with your help, is to refuse to accept as normal the fact that Black men today are far more likely to be stopped and searched by police, charged with crimes, and sentenced to longer prison terms than white men convicted of the same offenses. And we have seen the toll that takes on families torn apart by excessive incarceration and children growing up in homes shattered by prison and poverty. I don't claim to have all the answers, but I do know how important it is that we address these issues, and I applaud the National Action Network for being the champion of this cause and helping to build momentum for reform. As your senator, I fought against racial profiling and the disparity in sentencing between crack and powder cocaine. As your president, I'll work with you to lead a national effort for end-to-end reform in our criminal justice system, and I will appoint an attorney general who will continue the courageous work of Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch, two New Yorkers. Now, everyone in every community benefits when there is respect for the law and when everyone is respected by the law. So we have to rebuild the bonds of trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve, and stop the tragedy of Black men and women being killed by police or dying in custody. Every day here in New York and all over America, there are many police officers inspiring trust and confidence, putting themselves on the line to save lives. So let's learn from those police and departments that are doing it right and apply those lessons across the country and make sure the Justice Department has the resources to hold them accountable when they do it wrong. Reforming our criminal justice system, though, is just the beginning of our work. Over the course of my campaign, including in February at the Schomburg Center in Harlem, I've been laying out a comprehensive agenda for equity and opportunity for black communities. Mass incarceration is just one part of a broader set of interlocking challenges because years of underinvestment and neglect have hollowed out many predominantly African American communities. There aren't enough jobs, and poverty persists from generation to generation. Not enough families still today have access to the education their children deserve, the affordable housing they need to live in. Infrastructure has been allowed to crumble even if it was ever built before. A recent report found the economic impact of widespread inequality in education to be the equivalent of a permanent national recession. That's a pretty good description of what it's like to live in a community that's been repeatedly left out and left behind. And reports of economic recovery, which are real, because, you know, I don't think President Obama gets the credit he deserves for digging us out of the ditch the Republicans put us in the first place, has given us a strong foundation to go further. So now we need a truly comprehensive approach to how we lift everybody up. That's why I'm proposing a major $125 billion breaking every barrier agenda to revitalize and empower communities of color and places where unemployment and poverty remain stubbornly high, from inner cities to poor rural areas, from Appalachia to Indian country. The pillars of this agenda match many of the challenges that the National Action Network has also taken on. It has to start with a strategy to create more good jobs. So my plan devotes $20 billion specifically to help young people find work and $5 billion to help people who have paid their debt to society find jobs and support when they get out of prison. We're going to make more strategic investments in transit and infrastructure to connect black communities to areas where good-paying jobs actually are. On Sunday, I was in Baltimore, where the NAACP is fighting the cancellation of a much-needed rail line that would have made it easier for African Americans in low-income neighborhoods to access economic opportunities in other parts of the city. They say transportation is a civil rights issue, and I agree. And we're going to support black entrepreneurs, especially black women who are a powerful entrepreneurial force to get the capital they need to start and grow small businesses, because that's where a majority of the jobs will come from. We'll invest in education and apprenticeships. And it is outrageous that 60-plus years after Brown v. Board of Education, our public schools are more segregated by race and income than they were in 1968. We have to replace the school-to-prison pipeline with a cradle-to-college pipeline, because in America, every child should have a good teacher in a good school, no matter what zip code they live in. And families need safe, affordable places to live. Black and Latino families are disproportionately affected by the crisis of affordable housing in New York and other cities across America. That's forced thousands of people out of the neighborhoods where they've lived for years. Meanwhile, public housing is under enormous pressure. Over the past 15 years, federal funding for the New York City Housing Authority has declined by nearly 30%. So as part of our Breaking Every Barrier agenda, we're going to make affordable housing a priority. We will defend and expand the current supply of low-income housing tax credits. We'll boost funding for Section 8 vouchers and give recipients more choice in deciding where to live. And because African American homeownership has long been one of the surest ways to fund and build wealth, we'll match up to $10,000 in savings for a down payment. Now, there's one more part of this agenda. The Reverend asked me to be substantive. Well, I'm giving it to you. Because you know what? When somebody asks for your vote, they should tell you what they're going to do, not what they hope to do. And they should tell you to hold them accountable, which I want you to. Because it is important that we do this together. I want to just talk very briefly about an issue that doesn't get enough attention. That is the challenge of environmental justice. Now, we all know what happened in Flint. Children drinking and bathing in toxic water for nearly 2 years because their governor wanted to save a little money. Parents held up bottles of brown, murky water and said something's wrong here, but their concerns were dismissed and belittled. Well, let me tell you, Flint is not alone. There are a lot of Flints across our country where children are exposed to polluted air, unhealthy water, and chemicals that can increase cancer risk. And like Flint, they tend to be places that are home to poor people and people of color. What happened to Flint would never have happened in a wealthy suburb of Detroit. It is no coincidence that black children are twice as likely as white children to suffer from asthma, 3 times more likely to be hospitalized, and 5 times more likely to die from the disease. Or that children of color are more likely than white kids to suffer lead poisoning, which can lead to lifelong learning challenges and even behavioral problems. It is no coincidence that nearly half of all Latinos in the United States live in places where the air does not even meet EPA public health standards, or that race is the single biggest factor determining whether you live near a toxic site, from Asthma Alley in the Bronx to Cancer Alley in Louisiana. And you know what? Climate change is going to make these burdens even heavier. So today I'm announcing a new plan to fight for environmental justice across America. When President Obama and I were both in the Senate, we worked together on legislation aimed at getting harmful lead out of child care facilities, classrooms, and homes with children. Now, I want to set an ambitious national goal to eliminate lead as a major public threat within 5 years. Some say, well, that's awfully ambitious. I say, if we put our minds to it, we can get it done. Let's set that goal, and then let's get everybody moving toward achieving it. We know how to do the work. All we need is the will. And let's push polluters to pay for cleaning up hundreds of thousands of toxic sites around America. When I was in the Senate, I helped pass a law to clean up brownfields and work to bring together developers, environmentalists, and local leaders from across New York to redevelop blighted properties. Let's take that work nationwide. Let's reduce air pollution and combat climate change by investing in clean energy and clean transportation. And oh, by the way, we'll put a lot of people to work. As part of our major national infrastructure strategy, let's protect health and safety by repairing not only what we can see, but what we can't, like the failing water systems, rundown public housing, and crumbling schools. Right now in the Detroit public schools, there are children in classrooms breathing the toxins from mold, and there are rodents sharing their space. And even here in New York, we know we've got problems. Let's do more like Philadelphia did when it installed green roofs and porous pavements to keep sewers from backing up into low-income neighborhoods. Now, you don't have to look far to see what this means for people. A woman named Michelle Holmes is here with us today. She's lived in the Polo Grounds Towers in Harlem for decades. She does daily battle with roaches, vermin, and other pests. And then the chemicals used to exterminate them cause other problems. Her family has frequent asthma attacks that often land them in the hospital. And then there's the mold, brown and green spots on the bathroom ceiling. No one should have to live like that in America. every child and clean water to drink and a safe and healthy place to live. This is a justice issue. It's a civil rights issue. And as president, it will be a national priority for us. So, my friends, throughout this campaign and then as president, I'm going to keep fighting to break down all the barriers holding back every American. My door will always be open to you. You will always have a friend and a partner in the White House. See, I believe that Democrats have a special obligation. If we're going to ask African Americans to vote for us, we cannot take you or your vote for granted. We can't just show up at election time and say the right things and think that's enough. We can't start building relationships a few weeks before a vote. We have to demonstrate a sustained commitment to building opportunity, creating prosperity, and righting wrongs, not just every 2 or 4 years, not just when the cameras are on and people are watching, but every single day. I have worked on these causes all my adult life. I'm going to keep going at it no matter what. And I want to close today by paying tribute to some extraordinary women who are here with us, who inspire me every day to fight harder, work longer, and never, ever give up. You heard their names when Reverend Sharpton introduced them, but I've gotten to know some of them personally and have had the great honor of spending time with them. Gwen Carr from here in New York, the mother of Eric Garner, who was stopped for selling loose cigarettes on the street and ended up dead. Sabrina Fulton, the mother of Trayvon Martin, shot and killed in Florida just for walking through the development where his own father lived. Valerie Bell, mother of Sean Bell, shot and killed by police here in New York on the morning of his wedding day, and Nicole Bell, his fiancée, who would have married Sean that fateful day. All these women and the others who are here, the family members of those who have been lost not only by police actions, but by gun violence of any kind, anywhere. The man who killed Trayvon Martin should have never had a gun in the first place. All of these women and other family members have endured unimaginable pain. I look at them and wonder whether I would have been that strong and resilient. Their grief is unimaginable, but they've not been broken. Instead, they are championing their sorrow into a strategy and their mourning into a movement. They are standing up for criminal justice reform, and they are standing up against the epidemic of gun violence that takes, on average, 90 people a day. That is 33,000 people a year killed by guns in America every year. Now, my opponent, who will be speaking to you tomorrow, and I don't see this the same way. But I think this is a national emergency, and I'm going to do everything I can to take on the gun lobby and to try to save lives, the lives of the children of women like this and the sisters and the brothers and the daughters and the sons of so many others. And I will work as hard as I can as your president to keep faith with them for police reform and demanding a criminal justice system that actually delivers justice. They're living what the Scripture tells us. Let us not grow weary in doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. These are words to live by, and I believe these are words to govern by. Think of the future we can build if we work together and don't grow weary doing good. The men on both sides of me have not grown weary. This organization has not grown weary. It is our obligation and our challenge not to grow weary either until every American has the dignity, the justice, and the opportunity they deserve. That's the future we should want for our children and our country. That's why I'm asking for your support in this election, starting in the primary on Tuesday, and that's why we'll roll up our sleeves and we will get results that will make us proud to be standing together for the kind of future that every child in this country deserves to have. Thank you, and God bless you.
All right, guys, so now you've heard from both Bernie Sanders